Today's video is about Aggressors Ancient Rome, a historical 4X strategy game that throws us into the tense and trying region of the ancient Mediterranean. If this is the first time on my channel, good morning, afternoon, evening, I'm Steven Nonsense and gaming and geek culture is what I do. If you're already a subscriber, welcome back, I appreciate it a lot. This is neither an easy nor a simple game, and much like the title suggests, you have to be super aggressive in order to be successful. Civilization, this definitely ain't. The unit models and graphics overall are quite simple, with very basic movement and attack animations. However, this means that the game runs very smoothly, and plus, let's be real, this isn't the type of game you play for the eye candy. You play Aggressors to
crush your enemies, see them driven before you,
and then get attacked by one of the many other different civilizations on the map. At least that's what happened to me repeatedly. While the main focus of this game isn't civilization building as it is portrayed in the Civilization series, for instance, you still have to build cities, networks of roads, and you have a very simplified technology tree to contend with. Situating cities in this game doesn't seem to be as important as in other 4Xs, but you still need to make sure that you're not founding a city surrounded by barren hexes. One interesting tidbit about this is that building cities on top of already destroyed ones will be cheaper than if you were to build a city from scratch. You might think this maybe doesn't come up as often, but in my experience, I'm rebuilding cities on top of my own ruins because the people in this game are really hard to keep happy and motivated to not riot, at least at the beginning stages of the game. There is no bread and circus feature, unfortunately. Several units in the game can found cities, however the cost and time will vary, plus you'll be out a unit when that happens, so keep it limited to using settlers and nomads. Rivers. Now, rivers are super interesting in this game because they act like natural barriers for unit movement. Not impossible to cross barriers like mountains, but temporary ones which slow down movement. But not just for troops. A mine that is located beyond the river will not connect to a city or a blacksmith if you don't build a bridge over said river. Trade routes take into account the type and length of terrain they have to travel through, and you can use this to your advantage because you can literally block trade routes by stationing units on them. Similarly, you can siege cities by simply surrounding them with your army units. Wherever army units move, they conquer the particular hex that they occupy. So by surrounding a foreign city in your hexes will isolate them from their resources. These cities will eventually capitulate. I haven't read a game manual in never, but I had to read the Aggressors manual because holy damn is the game deep. Also, the library available in the game is a great source to look through when you're interested in a particular aspect of the game. Just a couple more examples of the types of features that you'll have to contend with. Proximity of cities to the border will influence their happiness level because they'll be the first things to be attacked in case of an invasion. The game also has a birth policy slider. Yeah, all those troops and units have to come from somewhere. There's a universal slider as well as a city by city one. And I can't even begin to start talking about the diplomacy and trade aspects because honestly, I haven't managed to see a lot of the later stages of the game because it kicks my ass hard, even on the easy settings. I'm keeping it real, dear viewers. You can, however, get some practice with those later game features when you play one of the many scenarios that the game comes loaded with. Especially the 3 beginner scenarios, which feature both a simple and advanced tutorial. Trust me, you'll need to go through those if your main 4X experience is relegated to the Civilization titles. Also, you'll need it in order to learn how to use the mouse properly and to get introduced to the UI. During these scenarios, you'll be taking control of one of the 20 factions that the game sports, all of which are set up in a simulation of the Mediterranean region. Suffice to say, war and fighting is a big part of the game, but there are also a bunch of possible diplomatic agreements that you can get into, including the possibility of creating federations and confederations. And I cannot not like a historical game focused on ancient Rome that finally allows me to play with my ancestors, the Dacians. There are lots of options and possibilities when setting up a custom game. Each one of these games will be tense and challenging from the very beginning. Regardless of the level of technology that you start with, for instance, you'll need to be constantly exploring and founding new cities, building up a sufficient number of combat units, all while keeping an eye on a series of resources you need in order to build and maintain all of the new cities and troops. Particularly keep an eye on your people's happiness. As far as the troops are concerned, they aren't cheap to make or maintain and they all have different stats. and you need a certain number of combat troops to keep your people happy. However, you also need to keep an eye on your population numbers, because having too many units and not enough city dwellers will have the opposite effect. You can also upgrade them with a myriad of extra bonuses, such as improving their combat stats, increasing their movement per turn, or making them extra strong when fighting in a city, to name a few. But there are a bunch of other things besides the stats that will actually decide the result of a battle. Each hex has its own characteristics that either improve or decrease a unit's attack and defense values, so positioning is important. Then there's the morale of your troops, which is highly impacted by whether or not they are properly supplied with resources. This last consideration will make exploring or attacking an enemy willy-nilly a very bad idea. You'll need to do your best to scout out the land to make sure that you can direct your units through the hexes that are 100% supplied. Otherwise, they'll first lose morale, then they'll become damaged, and eventually they can defect to the enemy. These defections happen because they are demoralized and damaged, so they are easily swayed by the region of influence of the enemy. Granted, this can happen the other way around as well. In some circumstances, attacking troops will switch sides if they are resisted for too long and not supported. And you can use your influence as currency as well. You can spend it on foreign cities close to your borders to make them unhappy with their current leadership, and maybe, at a certain point, depending on your continued actions, the entire city will decide to shift over to you. By far the most interesting way of conquering cities is to use this slow and steady approach, at least in my book. Unfortunately, at least some of the other civilizations on the map will prefer the old-fashioned way, and they'll come pounding down your city doors. The one thing that the game could definitely do better would be the soundtrack, at least in my opinion. There are a bunch of songs present, very different in influences, but they just didn't gel for me as good background for the game. Thankfully, you can easily mute the music from the main screen, so that's cool. I'm sure there's a crap ton more that I'm missing about the game, but I can tell you that it has gathered a very active and dedicated community around it, and it's definitely something that you should look more into if anything I've said up until now sounds like it would interest you. So by the way, you might want to check out my At the Gates video series or look into my 4X and strategy playlist to see some other cool titles I've reviewed. And if you're interested in other Roman themed games, I have reviewed Caesar 3 a while back as well. Thank you very much for watching. I've been Steven Nonsense, and if you made it to the end of the video, then I suggest you maybe consider subscribing, since you might dig the rest of my stuff. See you next time.